Hello there. This is a small video before session 28. I want to cover some things which transpired after last session, the day after last session. It involves some Skyping that I did with the group. I'll read it. After some consideration, I've decided to fix an error I made at the end of last session. I had planned for the possibility of you folks leveling up last night, but while you didn't get into any combat, you certainly had a successful session where you accomplished your goals. I know all of you can fit a few more incremental advances, even if you end up slotting them into extra magic items, so go ahead and take another. Next session still will not be until November 3rd, which is today for me, same start time as yesterday. Unless you folks change your minds, I figure you'll be revisiting Creel, and that's where you'll likely end up getting your level up. The leveling game has slowed since your transition to champion tier. I've staggered incremental advances instead of having them won every successful session as the book recommends. Wanted to experiment like I did with the icon relationship dice. I think we'll go back to having an incremental advance after every session that didn't result in failure. I will say I'm happy that you pursued and succeeded with a non-violent resolution yesterday. You spent less time achieving victory here than you did in travel time, and that's not considering the way back. To not leave you twisting in the wind, next session will begin with you disembarking from Dragonhall and striking out into the Midland Sea. You haven't kept either the desk speaker or your sailors waiting for very long. However, your abjurer contact from the Arcane College will not be joining you, as he has a mission of his own to accomplish in Blue City. As your characters very well know, optimal travel time by boat between Newport and Dragonhall is 3 days. However, situations are no longer ideal. While the waters are mostly unfrozen, storms still batter Dragonhall, and even worse, the once calm waters of the Midland Sea. Universally, for almost every Imperial citizen, this is both frightening and unfathomable. The waters of the Midland Sea have been safe and calm for their entire lives. The powerful spell ensuring the sea's peace goes all the way back to the founding of the Dragon Empire and the Blessed Emperor himself. Similarly, the appearance of Sahagwin have caused great panic, or rather has caused great panic and trouble across the Empire. Attacks by these scaly humanoids have been almost unheard of in the Midland Sea. Only the runts were able to bypass the wards. The more powerful ones were thrust into the rivers, particularly the Fangs to the north, and of course out to the Iron Sea. That rule no longer applies. Your only concern out there used to be humanoid pirates and corsairs. Now there's these incredibly violent and furious creatures who'd love to eat you. Your sailors, provided by Lord Teraptus for your diplomatic mission, are less than enthused and would like to return to Newport. The increased risks of naval transportation have grossly impacted the Dragon Empire. Transport across the Midland Sea used to be a highly reliable fare with minimal risk. Now, lost shipments are ruining bottom lines and entire families. Those shipments? Weapons, medicine, and primarily food. Food prices are slowly continuing to climb. We're not just in the 2 to 3 times cost range any longer. The Dragon Empire has been blessed with temperate weather, and it's usually very warm along the Midland Sea. That's not true any longer, for whatever reason. The sailors are disquieted, full of rumors and suspicion from their days of shore leave in the City of the Blue. They have news. News that you haven't bothered to seek, and news you may have never wanted to hear. But we'll find out about that later. Right, so in this session, unless the players suddenly change their minds in a half hour, they are heading for the living dungeon of Creel. There are many rooms they have not explored within the living dungeon, and I am looking forward to seeing what route they choose this time. Perhaps they may even attempt to deviate off the path and go their own way. I haven't a fucking clue. They will begin on a boat. You will see all of these various icons here around their boat. Those are not icons the players can see. Those are elementals that I just wanted in place. They'll be revealed later in a intended to be non-combat affair, but perhaps it will be involving in combat. Now, the rest of this small video will contain session spoilers to lay out the planning and scheming that's going on behind the scenes. This session will be incredibly dangerous, and not for the reasons that you may initially perceive. The intellect assassin is aboard this vessel, despite Teraptus' attempts to basically have the players leave as soon as possible. The intellect assassin stowed away upon the ship and inserted itself into the mind of Jason, the cook of the mercenary company. Keep in mind that the players own this ship, having stolen it from Death's hand, and these sailors are merely provided by the Archmage. Jason has been possessed by the Blue Eyes character, who is an intellect assassin, a victory at Largasso Valley, and it has attempted to find a means by which it could redeem itself and exact a great value in its current position. It went off on its own, separate from the others, whenever everyone arrived in Drakenhall. And certainly the player characters, if they do some investigating aboard the ship for whatever reason, they will learn that Jason has kept himself a bit isolated and is the most disquieted of the lot. Now, on the second day, wind is pretty much going to die down, and the ship is going to come to a crawl. On the second night, I like to call him Blue Eyes more than anything else. Blue Eyes will make an attempt on the mercenary captain, Baldric Morse, in an effort to get himself into a more powerful position. That will succeed, and the captain will basically just blame Jason's oddities and his paranoia, and he basically must have fuck snapped. And the ship will get really sullen and quiet. But basically, Blue Eyes is trying to maneuver itself into a better position. Is not so foolish as to think it can surprise and take on one of the player characters, especially not in, their full health states. If they're so close together, it doesn't know for sure. It underestimated the player characters once, and it nearly died for that. And it has tons of patience, and it's going to wait. Now, when the players arrive at North Creel, assuming that they'll actually want to hide their ship, it will not be as conveniently located to the Living Dungeon as where they docked in the south. It's going to take possibly several hours for the player characters to approach the Living Dungeon. I'm going to have them make wilderness survival checks to see if they can find it adequately. And if the Death Speaker is left behind, the Intellect Assassin will make a play for the Death Speaker and will succeed, and the Death Speaker will die and be replaced by Blue Eyes. Now, the Death Speaker's power is pretty damn dependent on spells, and the Intellect Assassin will not have access to those spells. Once the Intellect Assassin takes control over an NPC whom it looks like the player characters trust, that's when Blue Eyes thinks that he has a great shot of isolating one of the player characters. The captain is going to be waved off as having fuck snapped, and he just fled on the escape craft. And there are clues in place to basically allow the player characters to recognize that something is wrong here. For example, there was only one escape craft, and the players, they had that destroyed last session. There is no other rowboat aboard this ship. The Intellect Assassin is going to have a momentary, a brief fuck-up, essentially. And he's going to say that the captain fled aboard the rowboat. And the player characters could recognize, hey, that's a lie. The sailors, they're going to meet an unfortunate end. Some of the creatures, the denizens of the island, are going to attack the ship. And the sailors will either be cut apart, or they're going to flee. It's something that the Death Speaker could probably have handled, except for the fact that the captain chooses then to make his move. And it's going to be in that weak position that the player characters, who are probably weakened themselves after their confrontation with the Living Dungeon, will find everything. Afterwards, well, the player characters will probably be intelligent enough to take their full heal up. The Death Speaker, the Intellect Assassin within the Death Speaker, will suggest that he could raise enough sailors to do the sailing, but he's going to need some more bodies, and perhaps the bodies of the sailors, the few sailors who died in front of the ship, are so mangled that they will not serve for being properly raised. With that in mind, the Intellect Assassin is intelligent enough that it will single out who it thinks is the best character for this sort of affair, and that is Tempus. The Death Speaker has some ties and some connection with Tempus, as Tempus was part of the group whenever rescued. The Intellect Assassin knows that Dwohurim is incredibly powerful, and being a wizard, Intellect Assassin doesn't want to push that. Besides, the Death Speaker wants to make the argument of an escort, looking for deceased bodies to raise to be skeletons to sail the ship. Leon, a similar situation. And the Death Speaker doesn't really know Geráck or Aurelia well enough to make that judgment call, so it's going to be Tempus. There is going to be one last combat situation that the players will get involved in, as some folks will attack the ship, and some folks will attack a search party if it is out, like the Death Speaker and Tempus, or someone else, or maybe the entire group will go together, which has its own costs. Because then the monsters will be at a ship that has no one protecting it or on it. Yes. Should the Intellect Assassin be undiscovered, should the Intellect Assassin manage to get a player character alone, the Intellect Assassin will strike. And the Intellect Assassin may end up consuming one of the player characters. Now, I'm not going to have it be a complete annihilation of that player character. The book offers some suggestions regarding how to handle, if you'll bear with me as I flip to the proper section, how to handle your brain being eaten by an intellect devourer. And this is how I'm going to handle it, where it's going to be like an awkward bonding between the devourer and the victim. Blue Eyes doesn't really have a tie to the three. Blue Eyes has a tie to power and information, and Blue Eyes is happy to come along with the ride, even to the extent of not fully consuming someone's brain. So yes, the Devourer, being intelligent and a master of infiltration, probably wants to pass as being the character until some goal is achieved. And that would completely swap backgrounds. My only regret is that Tempus ends up being the preferred target because of his oddities and because of his ability to handle himself in a one-on-one situation. Because Gryph, doesn't have the best attendance. He's having a lot of personal affairs in his life. His work schedule just makes him incompatible with what we do. That being said, I want to go with what the NPC would think is the best target, and it thinks that Tempus is the best target. So yes, there will be clues on the shores of where they dock this ship, and in the Intellect Assassin's own words, that if the players are investigative, they will notice indiscrepancies, and they have a chance to nip this shit in the bud before the Death Speaker dies. Before the Intellect Assassin transferred. Like, it could be done, like, maybe they just throw the fucking cook overboard. Maybe they realize something's wrong with the captain. But that might not transpire. And it might progress all the way to the Intellect Assassin being in the Death Speaker, getting a player character isolated one-on-one. And the Intellect Assassin is exactly what it says on the 10, an assassin. It's not going to have the incredible +6 bonuses, because the escalation die won't be that high whenever it pops out. But it might get some bonus, as Tempus and the Death Speaker say get into combat, and the Death Speaker's like, oh shit, my magic doesn't work, and Tempus has to struggle to protect him. All kinds of crazy things can happen. Yes, so there's your primer. Very spoilerific, but I figure it well enough that you as the viewer understand what transpires in this situation. I don't really care most of the time, but in this case, I figure I'll let you in on the secret if you want to be. Okay, okay.